I make 100 an hour to ignore the pedestal that says do not look when occupied. There's a plaque in front of me, made of cold, tarnished brass. It's screwed into the concrete floor, a few feet from a block of polished marble. 2 lines are etched into its surface. The first is a single word, painter. The second is a command, an absolute that offers no room for interpretation. Do not look when occupied. Right now, the marble pedestal is empty. It's just a clean white square in the oppressive gloom of this warehouse. But the rule hangs in the air, a permanent resident of this place, just like the smell of ozone and damp, disturbed earth. I wish I could say I ended up here by mistake, but that would be a lie. Desperation is a map, and it leads to places like this. My map was drawn by an eviction notice and the ghost of a wedding ring on my finger. The weight of it is still there, a phantom pressure I feel whenever I clench my fist. My new life consists of 4 walls in a room that always smells like my downstairs neighbor's cooking, and a bank account that's more of a punchline than a safety net. So, I went looking in the dark corners of the internet. Not the cartoonish dark web you see in movies, but the grimy, unindexed forums where anonymity is currency. Curatorial assistant needed. Temporary exhibition. 100 HRR. The address was a warehouse on the industrial outskirts of town, a place I'd only ever passed on my way to a life that no longer existed. I knew it was a front for something. You don't pay $100 an hour to have someone sit in an empty building unless the sitting is the least important part of the job. But the number was hypnotic. 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. It was enough to build a new life from the ashes of the old one. I sent a message. An hour later, a single line reply, Monday, 10 a.m., be punctual. And so I was. I arrived on a second-hand bike that groaned with every rotation, the chill morning air biting at my exposed skin. The warehouse was a concrete behemoth, a dead thing with boarded-up eyes and a single, yawning metal door. Standing before it was a woman. She was the one who had hired me, I supposed. She was difficult to place. Her face was a mask of serene, unlined youth, the kind of flawless skin you see in high-end advertisements. But her eyes were ancient, filled with a flat, weary darkness. And her hands were a roadmap of a long, hard life, wrinkled and blotched with liver spots that stood in stark contrast to the rest of her. Her hair hung like black silk thread, tangled and dull at the ends. You are Oren, she stated, not asked. Her voice was like dry paper crumbling. Yes, you are. I am the caretaker, she said, as if that explained everything. She turned without another word and slid through the groaning metal door, leaving me to follow or be left behind. I followed. The inside was cavernous, a cathedral of concrete and steel beams that vanished into a ceiling I couldn't quite see. The air was thick and still, swallowing the sound of my footsteps almost immediately. The place was mostly empty, the few exhibits looking small and lonely in the vastness. She led me through them, her steps silent on the dusty floor. Against the far wall stood a line of wooden figures, impossibly tall and thin. They were carved from a dark, gnarled wood, each one bent forward from the waist, their long, splintered fingers nearly brushing the floor. Their heads were angled down, as if they were giants scrutinizing an anthill. Their faces were a chaotic mess of knots and grain, featureless yet radiating an intense predatory focus. A small plaque called them the attendants. There were glass cases holding leather-bound notebooks, flipped open to pages of frantic, spidery script and unsettling diagrams. One showed a human skeleton with far too many joints, its limbs bent into an impossible pretzel. Another was just the same symbol drawn over and over, a spiral with a hook at its end. She pointed a long, wrinkled finger toward a set of instruments laid out on black velvet. They looked like medieval tools of torture. A saw with teeth that curved the wrong way. A set of forceps shaped to grip something perfectly spherical, something soft. Next to this grim display sat a pair of ordinary, modern-day craft scissors. "These are authentic," the caretaker said, her gaze fixed on the scissors. "They are very important." But it was the last three exhibits, set apart from the others in their own shadowed alcove, that made the breath catch in my throat. The first was a low, round table, maybe 2 feet high. It was savaged. The edges were gnawed and splintered, the surface scarred with deep gouges. It looked like it had once been square, but something had desperately chewed the corners away. The teeth marks were undeniably human. The plaque read, simply, "The Hunger." Next to it was a pair of men's dress shoes from another era. They were leather, cracked and faded, but the wear on them was all wrong. The soles were worn thin, not just on the bottom, but up the sides, on the tops of the toes, even on the inside arches, as if the person wearing them hadn't just walked, but had been dragged, tumbling and spinning for 1,000 miles. The shoes that walked home, the plaque called them. And then there was the empty pedestal, the white marble, the brass plaque, "Painter. Do not look when occupied." I stared at it, a cold dread coiling in my gut. "Interesting concept," I mumbled, mostly to myself. The caretaker's dark eyes snapped to mine. "It is not a concept," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "It is a rule, your only important one. We are paying for your discretion, Oren, your incuriosity." She took a step closer, and the air grew colder. "Do not look when it is occupied." "How will I know when you will know?" She cut me off. "Your desk is by the entrance. Greet our guests. Sell them a ticket." She gestured to a small wooden desk where a pathetically thin stack of paper tickets sat next to an empty cash box. That is all. Suddenly, I didn't want her to leave. The thought of being alone in this vast, silent tomb was terrifying. But she was already moving toward the door, a silent wraith gliding through the shadows. The massive metal slab slid shut behind her, the sound a deafening final boom that echoed for what felt like a full minute before the silence rushed back in, heavier than before. I was alone, with the art. For the first hour, nothing happened. I sat at my desk, listening to the frantic beat of my own heart. No one was coming. This place wasn't on any map, had no sign, no promotion. The tickets were a formality, a prop in whatever strange play I had stumbled into. To fight off the creeping unease, I decided to take a closer look at the paintings hanging on the wall closest to me. I stood and walked to the first one. The plaque said, "My Mother." The canvas depicted a seascape, but it was no postcard. The water was a churning, furious turquoise. The waves crested like grasping, white-knuckled fists. On the horizon, a storm gathered, a bruised purple swirl of clouds that looked unnervingly like a single, massive, watching eye. There was no mother. There was only the beautiful, violent sea, pregnant with rage. That's when it happened. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling. A sudden biological imperative that screamed through every cell in my body. "Are you run?" My neck muscles seized, my skin broke out in a cold sweat. It was the primal, lizard-brain fear of being watched by a predator. The air behind me felt thick, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. I was terrified to turn around, but the thought of keeping my back to the room was somehow even worse. Breathe, just breathe. Count to 3. 1. My heart hammered against my ribs. 2. The feeling of being watched intensified, a physical pressure on the back of my skull. 3. I didn't turn. I stayed frozen, my eyes locked on the raging sea in the painting. The waves seemed to churn faster, minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, with a choked gasp, I spun around and scrambled back to the relative safety of my desk, my chair legs scraping harshly against the concrete. "Jesus," I whispered, my voice trembling. "This place it's wrong. Why?" The voice wasn't a shout or a whisper. It was calm, conversational, and it came from the vast emptiness of the warehouse. It sounded like it was right next to my ear. My blood turned to ice. My throat closed up. I stared wildly around the cavernous space. The wooden giants remained bent in their silent vigil. The glass cases gleamed faintly. The entrance door was shut tight. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice a pathetic squeak. Silence. I heard you, I insisted, desperation making me bold. Whoever you are, this is a private exhibition. You have to buy a ticket. The words sounded absurd even as I said them. Thump. It was a soft sound from the back of the warehouse, from the alcove, where the hunger and the shoes and the empty pedestal were. It wasn't the clatter of something falling. It was a wet, heavy sound. The sound of something organic hitting the floor. My body was screaming at me to stay put, to curl up under the desk and wait for my shift to end. But the silence that followed the thump was worse than the sound itself. I had to know. I stood up, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I crept toward the back, placing each foot down with agonizing care. The rule kept playing over and over in my head. Do not look when occupied. Do not look when occupied. I stopped before I entered the alcove, peering around the corner. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor. I saw the chewed up legs of the hunger. I saw the impossible scuffs on the shoes that walked home. And I saw the base of the white marble pedestal. And on the floor, stretching out from the pedestal, was a shadow. It wasn't empty anymore. I didn't look up. I swear I didn't look up. I swear I didn't. It wasn't the sharp, clear silhouette of a person. It was a knotted, lumpy thing, a contorted shape crouched on the marble block. The proportions were all wrong. It was too dense, too dark. It seemed to drink the light around it and the edges of it. The edges writhed. A slow, constant undulation, like a heat haze, but it was made of pure black. I backed away, slowly, one step at a time, never taking my eyes off that squirming shadow on the floor. I made it back to my desk and collapsed into my chair, shaking uncontrollably. I didn't move for the next 3 hours. I just sat there, staring into the gloom, every sense on high alert. At some point, a new sound began. Slap, drag, slap, drag. It was the sound of footsteps. Wet footsteps. Coming from the back. You know how you can recognize the gait of someone you love? The light, quick steps of a child, the heavy, weary tread of a parent coming home from work? These footsteps were both, and neither. It was the up-tempo beat of a frantic, unbalanced limp combined with the slow, heavy pull of something being dragged. A sound like a soaked bag of rocks being rhythmically hauled across the concrete. The sound went on for what felt like hours, pacing back and forth in the darkness at the far end of the warehouse. It never seemed to get any closer, but it never faded either. Just a constant, wet, limping rhythm that drilled itself into my brain. When 5 p.m. finally came, I didn't wait a second. I burst out of the metal door and into the fading daylight, gulping down the clean, cold air like a drowning man. I swore I would never go back. But then I checked my bank account that night. The transfer had already gone through. A number so large it looked like a typo. Enough for a deposit on a new place. Enough for a car. Enough for a fresh start. I told myself I could do it. It wasn't so bad. Nobody had touched me. Nobody had even threatened me. All I had to do was sit at a desk and not look. I slept last night, but I dreamt. I dreamt of that wet, dragging sound, and this time it wasn't pacing in the distance. It was coming up the stairs to my apartment door. It's Tuesday now. I'm back at my desk. I'm writing this because I need to tell someone, even if it's just the anonymous void. For the first few hours, it was quiet. The pedestal was empty, but a few minutes ago, I heard it. Thump. And now, the footsteps have started again. Slap, drag, slap, drag. I don't think I'm imagining it. I swear I'm not. It sounds closer today.